"The land remembers what you forget," she warned, and the cowboy knelt in the ashes. Jesse McCrae had been riding for days, the endless horizon before him. The sun burned low in the sky, casting long shadows over the barren landscape. His horse, Dusty, moved at a slow, steady pace, kicking up the dry dust with each step. The planet Dagon was not the kind of place one would want to settle down. It was a dying world, far removed from the bustling cities of the Outer Rim, a world that had seen too many battles and too many broken promises. Jesse was no stranger to harsh places. He had spent years traveling across the frontier, looking for work as a hired hand or a bounty hunter, depending on what was needed. He had learned long ago not to ask too many questions. People didn't like it when you dug too deep, especially when they were trying to hide something. And here, in the forgotten reaches of space, there was a lot to hide. The dust was thick in the air, the wind biting cold as it swept through the cracked earth. He had heard rumors about this place, about Dagon. The locals spoke of it with a mixture of fear and reverence. It wasn't a world for settlers or farmers. It was a place that people forgot about until they came looking for something. Jesse wasn't looking for anything in particular. He had just followed the trail of rumors, and now he was here. The tip he had received was simple: find Alara.
She knows something about the land's secret. He didn't know who Alara was, but when a stranger tells you to find someone on a dying planet, it's usually worth the trouble.
Maybe she was a scientist, or someone who had lived here long enough to understand the history of the place. Whatever she was, Jesse was determined to find out. His horse came to a stop in front of a large, crumbling structure. The building was half destroyed, its walls long since eroded by wind and time. The remnants of old technology were scattered across the ground: broken machinery, rusted pipes, and metal scraps that had once been part of a thriving settlement. The air here felt different, heavier somehow, as if the land itself was watching him. Jesse dismounted, tying Dusty to a nearby post. He had the feeling that something wasn't quite right, but he couldn't place it. The land, the atmosphere, it all seemed to hold a quiet tension, as if it were holding its breath. As he approached the entrance, a figure appeared from the shadows. A woman, her face hidden beneath a long, dark hood. Her clothes were worn, as though she had been living in the wild for years. She stood still, watching him with eyes that seemed to pierce through the darkness. "You must be Jesse McCrae," she said, her voice steady but filled with an undeniable edge. "I've been waiting for you." He had learned long ago that sometimes the less you said, the better. Instead, he studied the woman carefully. She was older than he had imagined, but there was a certain grace in her movements, grace that only came from living a life close to the land. He had no doubt that she was the one he had come here for. "I'm Alara," she continued, "and I know why you're here." He simply nodded, waiting for her to continue. "The land remembers," she said suddenly, her words cutting through the silence like a knife. "What you forget, it never forgets." Jesse frowned, unsure of what she meant. The land remembered? That didn't make any sense. What was she talking about? He had heard strange things from people in the past, but this was something else entirely. "Don't look at me like that," Alara said, reading his expression. "I know what you're thinking. You're wondering what an old woman like me can know about the land. You think I'm crazy, but you haven't seen what I've seen. You haven't lived through the things I've lived through. And trust me, Jesse, the land is alive. It remembers." Jesse shook his head. He didn't want to hear this. He wasn't here to listen to old folk tales. He was here for something practical, something real. He needed information, not cryptic warnings. "I didn't come here for stories," he said, his voice hardening. "I'm here to find out what happened to the settlers. Why did they leave? What's buried down there in the old mines? What's really going on here?" Alara's expression softened, as though she had expected this response. "You think you know what you're looking for," she said quietly, her voice low and almost sorrowful. "But you don't. What's buried here is more than just old mining equipment and forgotten riches. It's something far darker, far older, and the land will never forget it." Jesse was about to respond when the ground beneath them suddenly rumbled. It was a faint tremor at first, barely noticeable, but then it grew stronger, the ground shaking with a force that made Dusty whinny in panic. Alara grabbed Jesse's arm, pulling him toward the entrance of the building. "We have to go," she said urgently. "Now." Jesse hesitated. He wanted to argue, wanted to question her more, but there was something in her eyes that told him this wasn't a time for questions. The rumble beneath them was growing louder, and the sky above had turned an eerie shade of red, the clouds swirling like they were alive. Alara pulled him inside the ruins, the old building creaking and groaning as if the very structure itself were coming to life. She led him through a dark corridor, past walls covered in strange symbols and markings, and then stopped in front of a large metal door. "This is it," she said. "This is what I've been trying to warn you about. The land remembers what you forget, Jesse. And if you don't leave now, it will remember you forever." Jesse's heart raced as he looked at the door, his mind spinning. What did she mean? Was she talking about some kind of curse? Was it just another one of those wild stories people told on the frontier? But the ground trembled again, stronger this time, and Jesse knew there was no time for questions. Whatever was happening, whatever Alara was talking about, it was happening now. "I don't know what you're talking about," Jesse said, trying to steady his breath, "but I'm not leaving." Alara stared at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. "You will," she said softly. "Eventually you will." As the tremors continued to shake the ground, Jesse felt a strange unease wash over him. He had no idea what lay ahead, but something told him that Dagon wasn't just a forgotten world. It was a place with a memory that might soon consume him. Jesse followed Alara through the dark, crumbling corridors of the old structure. His boots echoed in the silence, the air heavy with dust and the smell of decay. The deeper they went, the more the walls seemed to close in, as though the building itself was a giant, waiting to swallow them whole. It felt as though the very earth beneath his feet was alive, watching him. She didn't need to look back to know that Jesse was following. There was a quiet urgency in her movements, as though something was pulling her forward. She stopped in front of a large rusted door. The symbol on the door looked ancient, worn down by time, but there was no mistaking its meaning. Jesse felt a chill run through him as he stepped closer. "What's behind that door?" he asked, his voice low. "This is where it all began," Alara replied, her voice tinged with both sorrow and fear. "The land remembers the secrets buried here, and the people who lived here, the settlers. They knew something, Jesse. Something that we weren't meant to forget." Jesse wasn't sure what she meant, but he had a sinking feeling that he was about to find out. Alara placed her hand on the door, her fingers brushing the symbols. The air around them seemed to shift, like a soft breeze moving through a silent forest. For a moment, Jesse could have sworn he heard voices, faint whispers in the distance. The sounds were almost imperceptible, but they seemed to call to him. "Are you sure about this?" Jesse asked, his heart pounding in his chest. Alara turned to him, her face serious. "We don't have a choice. The land is awake, and it remembers. Once it starts, it doesn't stop until it has claimed what it's owed." He had never believed in ghost stories or the supernatural, but there was something about Alara's words, something about the way the land felt, that made him question everything. He nodded slowly, taking a deep breath as Alara pushed the door open. It creaked loudly, the sound scraping against Jesse's nerves. Inside was a room unlike any he had seen before, an old control room, its walls lined with strange machines and monitors. The floor was covered in dust, but the machines seemed to be in working order, their screens flickering with faint blue light. "What is this place?" Jesse asked, stepping into the room. His voice seemed to echo in the stillness. "This was the heart of the settlement," Alara said, her voice growing softer as she walked toward one of the machines. "Before everything went wrong." Jessie watched as she approached a large console, her fingers hovering over the buttons. She hesitated, her hand trembling slightly before she pressed a button. The room hummed to life, the lights flickering brighter. Jesse felt a strange sensation in the air, like static electricity crackling around him. The screens came to life, displaying old maps of the planet and images of the settlers who had once lived here. Jesse could see families, people working in fields, building homes, and living what seemed like ordinary lives. But something was off. The images flickered, distorted by time, but it was clear that the people in the images were different. They looked haunted, their faces weary, as if they carried the weight of something heavy. "What happened to them?" Jesse asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Alara turned to him, her eyes dark with the weight of her knowledge. The settlers didn't know what they were dealing with. They uncovered something deep beneath the surface, something they weren't meant to find, and when they did, they awakened the land. It was never meant to be disturbed. Jesse stepped closer to the screen, watching as the images of the settlers began to change. The once peaceful scenes shifted into chaos. The settlers were running, hiding, their faces twisted in terror. The images blurred, and then a loud crackling noise filled the room. "The land remembers every step they took," Alara said, her voice trembling now. It remembers every mistake they made, and it punishes those who disturb it. Jesse's stomach churned as the images on the screen grew darker. He could see buildings crumbling, the planet itself shaking as if it were alive. The settlers, once hopeful, now looked desperate. It was as if the land had turned against them, reclaiming what they had tried to take. "Is this what's happening now?" Jesse asked, his voice low. "The land is angry because of what I've found?" The land has been angry for a long time. The settlers, they thought they could control it, but they didn't understand. They couldn't understand. Jesse stepped back, his mind racing. He had been so focused on finding answers that he hadn't considered the consequences. But now, as he looked at the images of the settlers' downfall, he understood. The land wasn't just a place. It was something more. It was a living entity holding memories of everything that had happened, everything that had been forgotten. "Is there any way to stop it?" Jesse asked, his voice tight with frustration. Elora shook her head. "Once the land awakens, it's already too late. It will continue until it has claimed what it's owed. There is only one way to end it, but it's a choice you might not be ready to make." Jesse didn't speak for a long time. The weight of her words hung in the air, thick and heavy. He had thought he was just here for answers, but now it felt like he was standing on the edge of something far greater than he had ever imagined. "What do I need to do?" Jesse asked finally, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. Elora turned to him, her expression grave. "You need to go deeper. The heart of the land is beneath us. You must find it before it's too late. The settlers made the mistake, and now it's your turn to make a choice." Jesse nodded, though a sense of dread settled over him. He wasn't sure what Elora meant, but he knew one thing for certain. The land was alive, and it was far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. The question was no longer about finding answers. It was about surviving what had already been awakened. As they prepared to leave the room, Jesse could feel the ground beneath them shift again, the familiar rumble returning. But this time, it wasn't just the earth shaking. It was as though the very air had changed, as if the planet itself had taken notice of them. He glanced at Elora, who was already moving toward the door. Her face was hard, her expression unreadable. "It's not just the land we need to worry about," Elora said quietly, her voice heavy with something Jesse couldn't quite place. "It's what's buried deep inside it. And if we don't stop it now, it will consume us all." Jesse felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. He didn't know what Elora meant, but he was beginning to understand that the truth was much more dangerous than he had ever thought. As the door slammed shut behind them, Jesse knew that there was no turning back. Jesse followed Elora as she led him through the twisted remains of the ancient settlement. The wind howled in the distance, sending clouds of dust swirling in the air, but in the hollowed-out buildings, it was silent. The cracked stone walls loomed over them like silent sentinels, their broken windows staring into nothingness. Jesse had always felt a strange calm in the wilderness, but this place was different. It was as if the land itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. Elora moved ahead of him, her every step purposeful. She didn't look back, as if she had walked this path 100 times. Jesse, on the other hand, couldn't shake the feeling that they were being followed. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end, and every step he took felt like it echoed in the silence, louder than it should. "We're almost there," Elora said over her shoulder, her voice quiet but firm. "The heart of the land lies beneath us. You have to understand, Jesse, this isn't just about history. It's about survival. The land remembers everything, the good and the bad." Jesse didn't answer. He was still trying to process what she had told him. The settlers had disturbed something buried beneath the planet's surface, something that had been slumbering for centuries. And now, the land was awake, angry, vengeful. It had begun to stir again, just as Elora had warned. He had felt it the moment they entered the control room, the air thick with tension, the ground vibrating with a low hum. Something was happening, something he wasn't ready for. But there was no turning back. They reached a large stone slab, almost like a doorway, hidden deep within the settlement's ruins. The stone was smooth, but the surface was cracked, as though it had been disturbed long ago. Elora placed her hand on the slab, her fingers tracing the edges of strange symbols that Jesse couldn't understand. As she did, the earth rumbled beneath them once more. "This is it," she whispered, her eyes dark with the weight of what she knew. "The core, the source of the land's power. The settlers never understood it. They thought they could control it, but they were wrong." Jesse stepped forward, his boots crunching against the loose stones on the ground. He glanced at Elora, then at the slab. There was no turning back now. "What do we need to do?" he asked, his voice low but steady. Alara hesitated. "You need to open it. The core is inside. Only you can do it." Jesse frowned. "Why me? What makes me so special?" Ilara's gaze softened. "It's not about you, Jesse. It's about the land. The land remembers those who come here. And it doesn't forget easily. You're the one who disturbed it, even if you didn't mean to."
You're the one who can quiet it down.
How could he have disturbed something that had been buried for so long? All he had done was follow a few leads. But now as he stood before the stone slab, he felt the weight of the land pressing down on him. There was something in the air, something ancient and powerful, something that wanted to be heard. He stepped closer to the slab, his hand resting lightly on its surface. He could feel the pulse of energy beneath his fingertips, faint but real. The rumbling grew louder, and the air grew colder. It was as if the planet itself was breathing. Alara stepped back, watching him closely. With a deep breath, Jesse pushed against the stone. At first, nothing happened. The slab remained firm, unmoving. But then, with a soft groan, it began to shift. Slowly at first, then faster, as if something beneath the surface was coming to life. The ground trembled, and Jesse staggered back, his heart pounding in his chest. The earth was shaking, the sky above them darkening. The stone slab finally slid open, revealing a large chamber beneath. Inside, Jesse could see a pulsating light, bright and blinding. The air smelled faintly of sulfur, and the floor was covered in strange markings that seemed to shift and change as he looked at them. "This is it," Alara said, her voice almost reverent. "The heart of the land. The core. It was here long before the settlers arrived. It's been waiting for someone to awaken it." Jesse felt a wave of unease wash over him as he stepped into the chamber. The air felt thick, heavy with the power that lay beneath the planet's surface. He could feel it now, an energy that was both terrifying and mesmerizing. The light pulsed like a heartbeat, strong and steady. It filled the room, casting eerie shadows on the walls. As he moved closer, the ground beneath him shifted again. The chamber seemed to grow warmer, the light brighter. The symbols on the walls began to glow, illuminating the space with a soft, ethereal glow. Jesse's breath caught in his throat as he stepped closer to the source of the light, and then the rumbling stopped. The ground stilled. Everything went silent. For a moment, Jesse thought he had imagined it, that maybe the land had quieted down, that they had stopped whatever had been stirring beneath the surface. But then he heard it, a low, guttural sound, like a growl coming from deep within the planet. The walls of the chamber shook, and Jesse stumbled back. The light flickered and then went out entirely. Darkness flooded the room. Alara grabbed Jesse's arm, pulling him toward the exit. "We have to go. Now." What was happening? Was the core reacting to him, to his presence? Was this what Alara had warned him about? The land, awake and angry, was now pulling them into its depths, into something far worse than either of them had expected. They ran through the dark corridors, the ground beneath them trembling with every step. Jesse's heart pounded in his chest as the rumbling grew louder, shaking the very air around them. He could hear something else now, voices distant and muffled, like whispers carried on the wind. He couldn't understand the words, but he could feel the anger behind them. The land was speaking, and it was angry. Alara pulled Jesse toward a narrow passageway, her face tight with fear. "It's too late. We've awakened it. The settlers thought they could control it, but now it's out of our reach. The land will never forget what we've done." Jesse didn't know what to say. He was out of breath, his chest tight with fear. All he wanted was to survive. But now, the very planet they were standing on was turning against them. They reached the exit, but as they stepped out into the open, they were met with a terrifying sight. The land itself was shifting. The ground cracked open, and tendrils of light erupted from the earth, shooting into the sky like lightning. The air buzzed with power, and Jesse could feel the planet's fury like a weight pressing down on him. Alara turned to him, her eyes wide with realization. "It's not just the land, Jesse. It's the planet itself. And now, it's coming for us." The world around them was unraveling, and the only thing he knew for sure was that the planet was awake, and it was angry. The land had awoken, and with it came a force greater than Jesse could have ever imagined. The ground beneath him seemed alive, cracking and shifting as the earth groaned in protest. The sky above was dark, swirling with dark clouds that seemed to pulse with energy. The air was thick with a sense of dread, as if the planet itself was reaching out, pulling at everything it could touch. Jesse's heart raced as he glanced around, his pulse quickening. The whispers that had filled the chamber were now louder, like 1,000 voices, angry and desperate, all speaking at once. He couldn't understand their words, but the message was clear. The land was not finished. Elara gripped his arm, pulling him away from the crackling earth. Her face was pale, her expression tight with fear. She didn't need to say anything. Jesse could see the terror in her eyes. The world around them was unraveling. The planet was fighting back. "We have to go," Elara shouted, her voice barely audible above the roar of the wind and the rumbling of the earth. Jesse nodded, trying to keep his balance as the ground continued to shake. The air felt charged with power, and every step he took felt heavier than the last. The ground beneath them trembled with every movement, as if it were trying to swallow them whole. They ran through the ruins, the distant crackle of the earth's fury echoing behind them. Jesse's mind was racing. He had never been a man to believe in the supernatural. But what was happening now, what was unfolding around them, was beyond anything he could have prepared for. He had disturbed the planet, and now it was fighting back with everything it had. But it wasn't just the land that was angry. It was something much older. The core beneath them, the heart of the planet, had been disturbed, and now it was awake. And Jesse had no idea how to stop it. "Elara!" Jesse shouted as they stumbled over the uneven ground. "What do we do now?" "We keep moving," she yelled back, her voice urgent. "There's no stopping it now. We can only survive. We have to reach the old base. The shelter. It's the only place we might be safe." Jesse didn't know how far they had to go, or what awaited them. All he knew was that the planet was angry, and every step they took brought them closer to something even worse. The ground shifted beneath their feet, and the wind howled, carrying with it the distant roar of a storm. The planet wasn't just shaking, it was alive, and it was clawing at them, determined to reclaim what had been taken. They reached the old base in a matter of minutes, but the moment they crossed the threshold, Jesse felt a wave of relief wash over him. The air inside was different, cooler, calmer. It didn't feel like the earth was trying to swallow them whole, but that relief didn't last long. The rumbling outside grew louder, the earth shaking more violently as if the planet were throwing one last fit before it finally exploded. "This is it," Elara whispered, her voice almost lost in the noise. "This is where the settlers thought they could control it." They were wrong. They thought they could tame the land. But now it's fighting back, and we've awoken it. Jesse didn't respond. He couldn't. The weight of her words sank in, and he realized the full extent of what had happened. The settlers had made a terrible mistake, but they had never imagined that the land itself could be so alive. It wasn't just a planet. It was something more, something that had lived long before them. "Can we stop it?" Jesse asked, his voice hoarse.
Elara shook her head. "I don't know."
"We may not even have time. The core, it's linked to the planet. And if we can't stop it, if we can't calm it down, the land will take everything. And us with it." Jesse clenched his fists, his mind racing. He wasn't going to give up, not yet. There had to be a way to stop it. There had to be something they could do. They had come too far to just let the planet destroy everything in its path. "I'm not giving up," Jesse said, determination in his voice. "I didn't come all this way just to watch everything burn." Elara stared at him, her eyes filled with a sadness that Jesse didn't understand. "You can't fight the land, Jesse. You can't fight what's been here long before us." "I'm not fighting the land," Jesse said firmly. "I'm fighting for the chance to survive. For us to survive." Elara didn't speak again, but Jesse could see the doubt in her eyes. She knew deep down that the situation was hopeless. But he wasn't ready to accept that. Not yet. He stepped forward, his eyes scanning the control room for any kind of solution. The room was filled with ancient technology, long abandoned by the settlers who had once tried to harness its power. Jesse's eyes narrowed as he looked at the screens, at the blinking lights and the symbols that seemed to dance across the monitors. There had to be something here, something that could stop the planet from tearing itself apart. He walked over to the central console, his hands hovering over the buttons. He wasn't sure what he was looking for, but something told him that the answer was here, buried within this old, forgotten technology. "Elara," Jesse said, his voice steady. "Help me look." She hesitated but nodded, stepping beside him. Together, they scanned the screens, searching for any clue that might explain what had happened or how they could stop it. The rumbling outside grew louder, the earth shaking violently, but Jesse kept his focus. This was it, the last chance they had. Then, a screen flickered on, revealing a set of coordinates. Jesse's heart skipped a beat. It was a map of the planet's surface, but it wasn't just showing the land. It was showing the heart of the planet, the core, the place where the energy was concentrated. "This is it," Jesse muttered, his finger tracing the map. The core. This is where it all started. Alara looked over his shoulder, her eyes widening as she saw the coordinates. "That's where it is," she whispered. "That's where the settlers went, and that's where the land became alive." Jesse's mind raced as he thought through their options. They had to reach the core, but how? The planet was falling apart, and time was running out. The ground was cracking, the sky was darkening, and the storm outside was growing stronger by the second. But Jesse wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. He turned to Alara.
"We're going there.
"We have to."
The core is the key to stopping this." Alara stared at him, disbelief in her eyes.
"Are you insane? It's too dangerous." Jesse didn't answer. He couldn't explain why, but something deep inside him told him that this was the only way. They had to go to the heart of the planet. It was their only hope. Without another word, Jesse turned and made his way toward the exit. The storm outside was deafening now, the wind howling, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. The planet was angry, yes, but he wasn't going to let it win, not without a fight. As he stepped into the chaos, the ground beneath him cracked open, sending a shower of dust into the air. But Jesse didn't hesitate. He had come this far, and he wasn't about to kneel in the ashes of the world without one last chance to fight back.